Hello,
We're
everybody.
here.
I guess we're here. I think that was weird. I think I had it on in stereo again. You see, I told you, Colonel, that I could screw any audio or video, which I know everybody loves me for here. Don't I make you all feel better about yourselves because there are ways that I suck? But let's get to the point here. We're really excited to be here. Another edition of Amped Up with Cliff Schecter. I am Cliff Schecter, and David Shuster, as always, alongside me. As the better half or like better 2/3 or the guy that actually, was once an Emmy winning anchor and he's still Emmy winning anchors here. And we're so lucky to have Colonel Bree Fram with us, who I'm going to let her tell a lot of her story because it's pretty incredible, but she's everything from military like star to rocket scientist to congressional candidate to somebody who is much more organized than me, though that's not really difficult. So we'll leave that part out. Welcome, Bree. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. And I loved the opening montage. It was great to see, and particularly your inclusion of the Statue of Liberty, because that is a pretty representative of some of the things I'd love to talk about today.
Well, and before we get into that, Bree, just also to sort of set this up for our audience, Bree, you were a colonel in the U.S. Air Force, the highest ranked transgender service member, the first to reach colonel. You served in the Iraq War, 20-some years in the Air Force and then the Space Force. Tell us a little bit first, and we're going to talk about your run for Congress. You're running because, in part, you were essentially forced to leave the military under the Trump administration. Explain what happened.
So you are exactly right that I had planned to serve for many more years to come before this administration showed up and 1 week in put out an executive order that said that people like me are dishonorable, undisciplined liars who lack the humility required for military service. And talk about a shot across the bow on our character. Now, it wasn't completely unexpected. During the first Trump administration, something similar was done without that language demonizing us. And the result the first time was that there was a ban on anyone who was trans joining the military, and no one who was currently in the military could come out and receive care and transition. But an exception for those of us that had already done so and were still serving. This time around, not only did we get those attacks on our character, but it was also saying, no new people, but also a purge. We are going to throw all of you out, despite the fact that your service records are sterling. You met or exceeded every standard. And even, in fact, during the court cases that challenged this, one of the district court judges said, it's our service records that are Exhibit A, which prove the government's case is based on nothing but animus. Right. Still, Supreme Court let the government implement the policy, and we were all tossed out. Process is still ongoing.
I'm sorry. I thought you were done. I'm going to try. I'm not going to interrupt a colonel. So even though I interrupt a lot, I'm going to do my best here. But I would think this isn't very much not normal, but am I correct in remembering recently that Stanley McChrystal stood up and spoke out in favor of trans, the ability for trans folks to be able to serve in the military? Didn't that just happen at I feel like it was a graduation or something of that nature?
Well, this was actually my retirement event alongside 4 other trans service members.
Sorry. Okay, my bad.
That is absolutely okay. 5 of us from every service, except the Marines. We were missing a Marine who were forced out under this policy, did an event together. And General McChrystal was our presiding officer and one of the speakers. And I think what made it most clear was how he opened his remarks just to say, I don't know why I'm here.
That's
Look
what
at
I
the examples of the service sitting here on stage just next to me. This doesn't make any sense. And at that event, we couldn't even wear our own uniforms. They were sitting on a table beside us because had we worn them, we would have been brought up on charges.
Now, you mentioned that you saw all of this coming, but still, when it finally happened, it must have been devastating, personally, professionally. I mean, what was going through your mind?
Just the cost to this country as much as anything, that thousands of highly qualified service members, some of whom were doing their wartime mission deployed around the globe on battlefields, were all of a sudden going to be gone. There were going to be holes in units, holes that are not easily replaced. People who for decades had looked to their left or their right and seen this person who had their back, and then all of a sudden they're just told that person is no longer capable or qualified or in any way should be in the military. That's devastating, not just to those units, but to our national security.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was going to say and ask you. So, I mean, Trump always seems to go for a twofer, right? You know, he has to attack individuals and attack whatever their background may be, race or gender, or whatever it may be, and make that a part of it. But then, every time he does this, he's hurting our national security, and I assume that's compounded by all sorts of others who've been, resigned, and maybe some of them really did resign, but have been forced out. I did see, at least there was he apparently said at Davos he's now not going to invade Greenland. Apparently, maybe that's because everybody said, "Well, we'll attack you" and stuff.
Well, to be clear, he said he's not going to use force. He's still going to, I suppose, threaten tariffs and blackmail everybody and on and on. But at least
of course,
the military, at least for now, on this day, he says he's not going to use the military.
Right. I mean, it's true that it could change, but I do feel like in this case, all of us speaking out, hopefully, pushed him. I mean, you never know with him, but some of his advisors, again, there are military folks, I assume, there who are still very loyal to the Constitution. And it helps when they hear outside voices, whether it be and it helps embolden NATO countries to say, we're not going to take this from the US. So, I mean, I guess this is my awkward transition to that. Overall, what are your feelings? Do you think that this is truly the end of that idiocy? I mean, again, militarily, yes, he's going to be him, which he'll wake up on the wrong side of the cave one morning and slap a tariff on somebody. But
if Vladimir Putin had a wish list, Trump is fulfilling it every single day by dividing us and turning us away from our allies and the shared security and prosperity that we have built over the last 80 years. The fact that we had our allies sending troops to Greenland because of us is frightening. And I think that should be frightening to a lot of Americans. When Trump posted his little picture with an American flag covering Greenland, Canada, and Venezuela, that is the world seeing us as imperialist aggressors. This is a world we thought we left behind centuries ago. But this administration only seems to understand force and money. And that is incredibly problematic for the America that we know we can be, that we are better than that. We are not territorial aggressors. That doesn't make sense. If anything, we were always about inviting others to join us because we realized how much stronger we were together. And not just for altruism towards the world, that made us more prosperous here at home. His tariffs are the same thing because they are imposing tax on the American consumers.
Bree, we want to ask you about the congressional run in just a sec, but it's my view, and you know more about this than either Cliff and I, because you actually spent 23 years in Air Force and Space Force. Donald Trump says he wants to build this golden dome, right? This missile defense system in Greenland, and that he says it requires Greenland being part of the United States. But as I understand it, I mean, Greenland has said, bring on as many troops as you want, bring in whatever equipment you want. Is there anything about Greenland being part of the United States, a sovereign to the United States?
No.
Is there anything about this
that's nonsense? There is no reality to any of that. We have had a base there for decades. We do a critical missile warning mission out of a Space Force base there on Greenland. There is capability there. And that is the value that we have built with our allies because they let us put our forces, our systems, our equipment in their territory to make sure that we are providing global coverage for all of these things. There is nothing more that the United States would be able to do there that would be any different if we owned it, which makes no sense. Let Greenland and the people there decide that fate, along with Denmark. Right. They have a long relationship that we need to understand, but we have been champions of self-determination forever. There's nothing that says, give us your territory and we'll put additional defenses there, or in Ukraine to say, give us your rare minerals and we'll defend you. No, that is not the America that I believe in.
Yeah,
I mean,
and if this is about rare minerals or metals in Greenland, I mean, the Danes and the people of Greenland have already said we're happy to make a deal where maybe we split the proceeds so that, whatever money Donald Trump's friends could make from extracting this stuff, at least some of it gets shared with the locals. But I want to ask you about the congressional run. So you're out of the military, you're trying to sort of figure out what to do. How did you arrive at the decision to say, okay, I'm going to run for Congress?
Well, when the Supreme Court fired me, in essence, I had to decide, what is my next chapter? Because until that point, it had been, I'm going to fight for my ability to serve, for the ability of thousands of others to serve. But at that point, those options were foreclosed. And so this is really my way of continuing my service. The oath I swore to the Constitution does not expire when the uniform comes off. This is me continuing to serve. And I believe that the experience that the military has given me, not just in being the best version of myself, but also in protecting others, whether that is truly around the world, keeping Americans safe on the battlefield or here at home, in leading complex programs, in planning the future of security, managing billion-dollar programs. That's experience that I can use for this country. All the education that this country has given me, multiple master's degrees to understand not just engineering, but also national security and the international environment, how the government works and how we can collectively as a whole United States government make American lives better. I want to be able to put that knowledge to work for the people of Virginia and for this nation.
Yeah, well, it's awesome. And we need much more of it. I want to point out for a second that, of course, the dome that Trump wanted to build was a golden dome. Anybody know? I mean,
Right.
like it couldn't just
Right, of
be,
course.
it couldn't just be a dome. It has to be golden, I'm sure. I mean, he's such a, okay. So in terms of your service, Bree, did you ever, I mean, because you were fighting this fight for a while before, of course, they then went and kicked you out. Did you ever find yourself along the way, in just a state, maybe emotionally or mentally, where you felt like giving up, where you felt like just saying, this country that was obviously, not most of us, but the jackals in charge right now were rejecting you. Did you ever feel like, why am I doing this?
Never. There is one thing that I did not ever learn in my 23 years of military service, and that was how to surrender. There was no chance whatsoever that I would give up either for myself, for my family, for the people that I served alongside, or for the America that I believe in. I have a deep sense of faith in who we are, who we can be, and the founding promise that says we can be better tomorrow than we are today. That concept that America is an idea, one that we must continually renew and fight for, pursue life, liberty, and happiness. I can trace back my roots on one side of the family to service in the Revolution, and even before that to a member of Virginia's House of Burgesses in the 1650s. Wow. And so deep Americanism on that side. And then on the other three branches of the tree were 20th century immigrants and refugees, people that escaped from Germany in 1936, the day before the SS came to arrest them. Another part of the family came from Latvia and Ukraine. And then both of my grandparents turned around as soon as they were able and went back and fought in World War II because they knew what they were fighting against. They knew what they were fighting for. They were fighting for my opportunity to live freely. I believe in that same thing, that though I thought the fight that they had against Nazis was done, if I have to pick up that mantle today and carry it forward, absolutely, because my grandchildren, your grandchildren, deserve the same opportunities that I was given to grow up in peace with any possibility in front of me ready to be seized.
Well, I'll just say quickly, I just want to point out quickly, and you've pointed this out in an article, David, I think one of your pieces, when we get to the point where Germany is sending troops to Greenland to defend Europe from America's fascism, we've truly gone around the bend. And no offense to Germany, but for those of us who are study history, it's sort of okay. That's where we are now. Go ahead, David.
Well, Cliff, I want to pick up on the point that I think you were getting at, and maybe ask the question slightly differently. And that is, I think for a lot of us who have not served in the military but have a lot of admiration for the U.S. Armed Forces, I guess the question is, was it more difficult for you being in the military? How did the military handle you as transgender? I mean, is it more difficult? I mean, is the military good for, I mean, generally, are most of the troops supportive, or it's not an issue, or are there moments of bigotry and whatnot?
So I'll share with you my experience, and I think this is vastly replicated through the majority of trans experiences in the military. When I first came out in 2016, the moment the Secretary of Defense finished speaking, saying we could serve openly, after a brief period of hesitation, because I had some nerves, I hit post on something to Facebook, and I hit send on an email to all of my colleagues coming out as trans. At which point I ran away. I went to the gym buried underneath the Pentagon. I hopped on the elliptical machine, and I went nowhere faster than I had ever gone anywhere in my life. But eventually I had to go back, sit down. One by one, my colleagues came over to me, shook my hand, and said, "It's an honor to serve with you."
Oh.
And I was floored, because it was my honor to serve with them. They were incredible people who embodied that military ethos that we talked about earlier. Look to your left, look to your right, got my back, great. Let's go accomplish the job that the American people have given us. And so fast forward through an amazing series of assignments and programs and people that I had the honor of working for, of leading, of working alongside. When the executive order came out and we knew this was coming, I would have colleagues, people that I didn't even know in many cases, walking up to me in the Pentagon saying, "I see you, I love you, you're amazing, go fight this, do what you need to do." And in my last week, as I would go to meetings, still doing my job, I had to realize, hey, this was the last time I was going to this event or that. And because the Space Force is so small, we often send someone who is one or two ranks below what the other service is. So I'm at a meeting with the Joint Staff, room full of admirals and generals. I am the last one at the end of the meeting as they go around the table. "Hey, what you got?" I'm like, "Here's one work-related thing. And unfortunately, this will be my last meeting. I don't know when we'll have a permanent replacement, because this is an unexpected departure for me." The officer sitting next to me says, "Oh, why? What assignment did you get? Where are you going?" Because when I walk into a room, no one would see a trans person. They saw a colonel. They saw the uniform and all that represented. But reality did settle in over that room, and a beat or two later, as it did, the scene from 2016 repeated, this time with admirals and generals standing up, walking over, shaking my hand, but with the sadness of past tense, saying, "It's been an honor to have served with you." That says everything you need to know about the service of trans people. We were welcomed, we were respected, and we were valued for meeting or exceeding the standard, just like every other service member.
And
Right.
I think that's the military that so many of us could only hope for. And it makes the way that Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump have tainted this incredible institution, it makes it even, I think, to the rest of us, even more heartbreaking, because this is something the military has long been ahead of the rest of society in many ways, whether it's immigration or LGBTQ. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And to see the way that these goons are trying to turn back this treasured institution, it's just heartbreaking.
It's unimaginable to think of a military without the groups that had once been excluded, like African Americans, like women, that we saw how much stronger we got when we were able to tap into the talents of every American who wanted to serve. But we are going backwards in that right now. And where I really fear is for those other communities. Yes, trans people were several thousand plus individuals that are gone, but where's the looming retention crisis where women who saw every 4-star fired, almost all of the 3-stars fired? We had one of those fired 3-stars jump into a congressional race in South Carolina just yesterday. And that message is, you don't belong here. I mean, you fired the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, who was an African-American man who created maybe the single best recruiting video ever for the United States Air Force, when he sat down and talked about flying his mission and said, when I put my mask on, when I put my helmet on, you don't know who's in the cockpit of that jet. All you know is that it's an American airman kicking your butt. This guy was incredible, but we are sending a message. Pete Hegseth knows nothing. He is waging a war on the military and our future capability by saying there is only a small subset of people who belong here. The rest of you, fine at best, but we don't really want you here.
And it so echoes history, right? I think of Truman, I guess, in 48, integrating, troops, and everyone's, oh, morale. It's always the morale thing that is going to disappear if we allow women in combat, if we allow, and your story just now, how powerful it is of everyone walking up to you. I mean, again, it is always the opposite of what right-wingers say it's going to be.
Yeah, it was the same BS arguments used against every group that you were somehow unwilling or incapable of serving. And we have seen that repeated every time over the past 100 years. African Americans, women, LGBTQ folks, women again in combat, every time those same arguments were brought up, and they were proven false by the capability of those people on the battlefield,
Right,
doing their wartime mission and earning the respect of their colleagues.
because if I'm correct here, you're trans, but you've never had any bone spurs that have led you to run away from missions that you were supposed to be sent on. Am I correct in that assessment?
23 years wearing the flag on my shoulder, deploying to where my country needed me to be, developing and delivering technology right from the laboratory to the battlefield that saved American lives. That was my job in the military.
Thank you for doing that job, by the way.
Bree, tell us a little bit about the congressional district in Virginia and who you would be up against and who currently holds the seat.
Well, that's a great question, because Virginia is in the middle of a redistricting effort. We as a Commonwealth are going to vote on that in April as we move to a very different map, one we don't yet have. So there are going to be new lines and the chance to flip a number of seats. And so my plan, though I've filed in Virginia's 11th, is I will run in the district that I live in. I just don't know what that's going to be yet, and I might not for another 6 weeks or longer. But if you don't start now, if you don't jump into the race, by the time you have it, you're at a huge disadvantage.
Sure.
So that's why I wanted to make sure that we were putting out a message for Virginia voters that says, this is who Bree is. This is what she believes in. And regardless of what those lines are, she's going to be a fantastic candidate to represent you and take your issues to Congress.
Now, obviously, there would be a primary, right, to determine who the Democratic nominee would be, and then a general election. And I would imagine some of the questions that you face in each might be a little bit different. How would you describe, or how would you distinguish yourself on the issues, say, from a centrist Democrat or somebody who wants to sort of appeal to that kind of Virginia Democrat?
Yeah, I can't draw any contrasts yet with people that I don't know who I might be running against in a primary. But I think the biggest thing that I can deliver are those national security credentials. I am a rocket scientist. I have planned and led billion-dollar no-fail programs and delivered results. So I want to take that and use that as I can actually get stuff done and provide this vision for who we can be, to talk about the American story, the Virginian story, in a way that actually motivates people, that brings new people in to vote, to get engaged with the political process, and more than anything, to stand up and push back, because our rights are under assault right now. And I will do everything I can to remind people of their right to speak, their right to assemble, their right to say, this is not who we are. We should be safe, seen, and celebrated in our communities, not afraid of what the federal government is going to come do to us, our neighbors, our children. That terrifies me. And I mentioned having family that came from Germany. I recently got the chance to hold and to see some of their pass books with a big red J stamped in it for Juden. And to see that and hold it in a society that was that classic, show me your papers, and realize we're having that happen here today, or we're even skipping that and we're just dragging people out of their cars, even without knowing that they're US citizens. That's awful. That is not what the government should be doing to terrify Americans.
Do you have thoughts on how we should respond? Obviously, there is a big debate right now, and I'm not going to hide which side of it I'm on. I think that ICE is just, call it what you want, call it the SS. Which, by the way, there was a guy walking around, a member of ICE in Minneapolis, with SS tattooed on his neck, and didn't feel a need to even remove that. But call it that, call it KGB, call it Genghis Khan's army. I don't, like, they do not. There's no. I mean, it's like our Constitution doesn't exist. It's like state laws don't exist. What would you do? Because right now, I've just heard another former member of the military, who's a Democrat, Seth Moulton, come out and say that we should fully defund ICE. There are others who've said, who are, in my opinion, are not doing nearly enough. I mean, we're not talking here about policy disputes, whatever. We're talking about pure fascism in our streets. We're talking about a woman shot in the face in her car and murdered. People who have harrowing stories of being taken to what amounts to concentration camps and spending days there with people, and they're American citizens, a day or two there with people that don't even have their rights. God knows what's happening to them. If we don't defund, and we will need to know by the end of this month what they're going to do there, do you see any other way? And I'm open to other ways. I just haven't heard it yet, that we can stop ICE from. I mean, again, we can stop what is a secret police force, a Stasi in our midst.
One of the things that I think absolutely has to be done are some of these officials that are both shielding these ICE agents, basically granting them immunity. They, like the effort now to impeach Kirsty Noem, those types of things need to happen, because whatever people are doing on the ground, there are people above them protecting them and saying, you can do whatever you want. You get to be a thug with a gun, and we're going to give you $50,000 just to sign up for that. That is incredibly problematic. So yes, there are some issues with how do you fund this organization and how can that be taken back. But you also have an administration that is willing to unconstitutionally move money from one area to another. So the courts really are going to need to weigh in and say, yes, the law of the land still applies even if you are a federal agent. And it also applies if you are a government official. No one is above the law in this nation. And I think we actually need to start talking about constitutional change. I know that's difficult. I know it's a long path, but we need to start now to think about not considering the Constitution as some document that was written and is left to die and be interpreted by judges. We can make changes to that. And a lot of that should include limits on executive power, to include the pardon power, which would allow these people to commit crimes and get away with it, to say that no one in the government is above the law, and to make sure that foreign influence is kept out even more so from our federal government.
I hear you and agree on the idea of impeaching some of these other officials, but on the issue of funding, is it as simple as saying, yes, we're going to take away DHS and ICE funding? Or if not, is it because it's more complex than that?
I think right now it's more complex than that with what this administration is trying to do. So for the members that right now are trying to work on defunding the program, clearly this is a bloated, overfunded program. There are some missions that the organization has that need to be done, but it should never, ever be used as a weapon against Americans or people that are here and just going about their business. So I am terrified by what ICE is doing, how ICE is represented to the American people, and there needs to be something new. I think in the long run, there cannot be an organization that looks at all like this, even if some of the missions that it has on paper remain important to the people of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't mean to belabor this, but I really feel this is such a crucial question. I know I get fully what you said about defunding. They might just move money around. Sadly, though, what they've also proven is that they don't, I mean, in very basic ways, won't follow the Constitution, no matter what we do. So I feel like the defunding, even if they move funds around, is a way of sending a message that we are standing up to this group of thugs. Again, these are, in the United States of America, people that are masked, people that refuse to identify themselves, people that don't have warrants and break in your windows or break in your doors and throw pregnant women to the ground. I guess what I'm asking is, if we don't do that, do you think there's something else we can do? Because I do think it's so important that we send a message to everyone that this is not okay and that we are forcefully taking it on. And I don't feel like just saying, well, now they have to wear body cameras and get training. Their purpose. I mean, some of these guys are Proud Boys. I mean, a guy, as I said, had an SS tattoo on his neck. Some of these guys are in gals or were from January 6th. So I guess it's, what is it that could make, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you think there's anything else we could do that would make that statement that we are not going to tolerate this anymore?
I think the response we're getting out of Minnesota is actually a surprisingly good one. I have a lot of friends and family still in Minnesota. I talked to a high school teacher, one of my oldest friends, just the other day, and he says, only half the kids are showing up. He, as someone who doesn't have skin that looks like mine, carries his passport around all the time. So what is actually being done to use those rights we talked about to assemble, to film, to hold accountable, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get this administration to stop without getting rid of this administration. So I think that is the biggest long-term goal that we have to have, is ensuring not just the Democrats take the House in 2026, hopefully the Senate as well, but in taking all three levers of power in 2028 as we vote in the House, the Senate, and a new president. What we can do right now, as you talk about defunding ICE, is minimize the harm that can be done, but it is really people standing up and showing the consequence, pointing out the hypocrisy between what this administration says that it's doing in removing the worst and the worst, and the fact that it is over and over again doing what you said, dragging Americans out of their car, leaving them in the cold and the snow. It takes all of us, and it takes mass protests. So people should be exercising those rights and showing just how wrong all of this is.
One of the people in the administration who I think is horribly wrong on so much stuff is Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, or Secretary of the War, whatever the hell they want to call it. If Democrats do take control of the House, there is the possibility for impeaching folks like Pete Hegseth. It's sort of a two-part question. What has been your view of some of the activities that Hegseth has done, whether it's sharing, bombing information on an unsecured chat, or whether it's attacking those boats off the coast of Venezuela without getting congressional authority? And what's your view of that? And secondly, related to it, should Congress, if Democrats take control, should they move to impeach Pete Hegseth, which may be as much of a political question as anything?
Well, he is clearly the most unqualified Secretary of Defense that we have ever had. And that's regardless of what he's actually done prior to this to be unqualified. He is proving it every day with the action he takes. He doesn't answer the fundamental question of, should we do this thing with the military? The only thing in his mind is, can we? Okay, great, let's go do it, even if it's the wrong thing. And guarantee you, it is always the wrong thing.
With these guys, yes.
You make the wrong choice. You punish your own people. You focus on war winning in his mind instead of what the military is really there for, which is preventing wars from ever happening. It is only our job to win wars if they start. It is not our job to start them and to start conflict around the globe. So I would be hard pressed for you to give me an example of something that Hegseth has done that I remotely agree with, because he is weakening our force by focusing on the petty and the cruel, giving us, as I'm sure there is, and that we'll see as soon as the data shows it, a retention crisis. Because I know that I did not sign up to be part of a Department of War. That is wrong, in my opinion. And that is one of the first things that needs to go. But I do like making the joke about this because, it's not a legal name and they've got to go to Congress to ask for permission to use it. And I think I know a thing or two about what that's like. And is this what the president means when he says transgender for everybody? We're going to start with the cabinet. We're going to make them be the ones that have to come up with a new name and ask for it from the courts. Sure. Great, Donald. Appreciate that.
I'll be honest. I think it's just because, obviously, Department of War was there from the past and branding. Like, I was sort of surprised he didn't just call it the manosphere. or something. I thought Hegseth, are like 3 brewskis in, or
I mean,
something like
the
that.
Don Rowe doctrine is a pretty good one. I'm like,
Yes,
congratulations on that.
it's definitely up there with the berating the Norwegian prime minister about the Nobel Prize he doesn't give over the country of Greenland he doesn't run. I mean, you can't. I don't. I mean, you know what? That actually leads to a really good question that I'm thinking about now. I mean, okay, so I lived in Europe 2 different times. I spent a lot of time abroad. It was always kind of funny. Oh, you gauche Americans, you dumb Americans. That we weren't as well educated, and I can make a whole argument that, frankly, since the days of Reagan, we've taken money from the very things that made us great, and it's only gotten worse over time. And it's given Americans we lost the aura we had after World War II. Let's just say, I mean, after this. Do you think we can ever get back the credibility that this group of, for lack of a better term, pantaloons has taken from us? I mean, just think of the you just brought up Pete Hegseth, and that's only one human. There's Kash Patel and the country western or country singer. There's Christy Nome shooting her dog and posing in front of, in war crime pictures in front of prisoners. I mean, I could go, I can go on, and you could go on, I'm sure, Bree. How can we even come close to getting that back?
The answer is yes. And I believe that it has to be yes. But the work of rebuilding, and even better yet, renewing, having something better, not just going back to what we have, I see this as opportunity. This is akin to Lincoln saying, we need a rebirth of freedom. We need another founding of this nation. And that's why I brought up constitutional change. We can be better, but that work is hard. That work is long-term. That is the work of decades, if not generations. It is so much easier to destroy than to build. But we used to be able to do those hard things. You mentioned Europe, and clearly the Marshall Plan after World War II, that was, seen by a lot of people as, why would we do that? Why would we send our resources to rebuild this problem that the Europeans created?
Yeah.
But that put a lot of good into the world, not just because it was the right thing to do, but because who did American businesses then sell products to?
Right.
How did we grow our trade? Why was America looked at as this beacon of freedom? Because we did the right thing, and it just happened to benefit us as well. So I mentioned at the beginning the Statue of Liberty, and again, that word beacon, that one is so important to me, that the United States as a nation of immigrants who was built on wave after wave, generation of generation of people seeking a better life. And right now, instead of people being encouraged to come here and build that life and build on this shared idea, this dream that is America, we are a source of refugees, not a beacon to them. And so that is the work that we need to be doing. Turn that around, rebuild trust, come up with something better, because we can get there. We just have to be willing to think a little bit longer term.
Gotcha.
And to get to that America
will get us there, do you?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I was just making a joke. I was saying, you don't think the Board of Peace will get us there, do you?
Nothing where the price of entry to the worst abusers of human and civil rights in this nation is, oh yeah, just give me $1 billion.
Right, $1 billion in Bitcoin.
There is a question, and Cliff and I have asked this of other candidates and other guests, in terms of, as we try to seek to repair this world, repair this country, how do we do that? How do we show some accountability? And there is a sharp debate about whether there should be something like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission at the end of all of this, or whether we should just try to move on because the American people can only focus on so much at one time. Where do you come down on that?
Yeah, that is a really different one. And we have a difficult one. We have a long history with this. We can think back to the pardoning of Nixon or what occurred during Reconstruction after the Civil War. But I think one of the most damaged ideas that we have right now is that we are a country based on the rule of law. And if you have committed crimes that are documented, that we have the ability to hold people accountable, that's critical. because accountability is central to trust. If we don't have people that are accountable in our federal government, why should anyone trust them? And we need a government that actually delivers services to people when they need it. And just, this is a simple example, but I had to make a Social Security appointment for one of my kids. And here in Virginia, and the Social Security website says you make this appointment online and you have to go to your local office within 30 days to finish it. Yet that office says there are no appointments for another 60 days. So I had to go to another state to get that appointment done in time. That's not effective government. And this administration is taking an axe to that and making it even harder. So we have to rebuild the trust in the way that people engage with the government on any given day in their lives, and at the leadership level, where you are a steward of the American people. The president and other government officials are there to faithfully execute the laws of the United States. And if they are not, they need to be held accountable for it.
Well, and I have to say here before I ask a question, I feel like what you said there is so important. You brought up the Marshall Plan, which worked, right? And Bretton Woods and everything we did to strengthen, yes, those that had been our enemies and create 70 years of prosperity and relative peace. Certainly there wasn't a World War III during that period of time. And you know, everything that we did there. I feel like Reconstruction was the opposite. Right. We did it for about, you know, during Grant's time, and then Hayes threw it overboard. And we did not change from the culture that had dominated in the South to a democratic culture. And so that's why, to me, David's question there is so important, which is, look, if to me, Trump, you know, is certainly a symptom as well as sort of an accelerator of this illness. I think Mitch McConnell and others that dumped money in our politics and screwed up our judiciary and allowed this to happen. But I guess I'm agreeing with you here. I feel like you know, if we don't, you know, and the question is how to do this. So maybe there's a question in there for you. You know, if we don't do this right, I think truth and reconciliation is part of it. I think creating whole new institutions. You were talking about the Constitution. I think constitutionally, and even so many things that aren't required by the Constitution. We could make DC a state by an act of law. We can make Puerto Rico, if they're interested. We could make, everybody's like, oh, well, what about the U.S. Virgin Islands is too small. Listen, no offense to anybody out there, but there's as many cows as people in Wyoming, and they get 2 senators. So I think the Virgin Islands of 200,000 people would deserve the same thing. I think we have to think big. Same thing with the Supreme Court. When I realized that we haven't added anybody since 1869, and this country's grown 13 times over since then.
There's nothing magic about 50 states. Absolutely.
I'm sorry?
There's nothing magic about the number 50 with the states.
Yeah, so all of this, right? And there's nothing magic about 9 Supreme Court justices. And I hear people say 13, and I think, well, if you're taking this beyond just the political, the fact that they've stuffed it with these corrupt hack political types like Alito, you also have that they reject over 99% of cases. They can't handle their workload. That you could eat that. I really think we need more like 21 justices, or, you know, whatever we could build up. So, I mean, do you have some specific ideas along those lines of how we could move towards, you know, really living up to the promise of what's on that document of ours, and that goes beyond what we had in the past? I call it an FDR moment, but call it a Lincoln moment, call it a, you know, whatever you'd like.
I think a lot of the secret to getting that effective government that is central is getting that trust back again with the federal government. It is not taking away funding from programs that support a well-executing government. What this administration did with DOGE was absolutely wrong. This was the chainsaw rather than the scalpel to areas where maybe could have been improved. But it is taking regulations and minutia that have crept in over the centuries and cleaning that out. So that's why I say we don't just go back. We have to reimagine some of our institutions that are incredibly important to who we are, but make sure their focus is on providing what the American public needs. And a lot of that really does come down to, do we trust our government? And that's where holding people accountable to what they are expected to do, not just by the law, but in many cases also by an oath, is really important. Because if we don't believe in our government,
I don't mean to interrupt, but that you feel like that's the first step is regaining trust. And then from there, we can take the broader.
Absolutely. We need leaders that we can trust that have the vision that can put some of this stuff in place. And that is incredibly important to the way we operate. I was just thinking of the Kennedy quote, ask not what you can do for your country, but ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That is actually a really hopeful vision where your country is doing the right things and you want to support it because the government is doing good.
Oh.
We have flipped that on its head because we know our government is in many cases doing the wrong thing. It is violating the rights of Americans. It is putting chaos into the world. Why would someone want to be part of that type of thing right now, even though federal workers, for the vast majority of them, are there because they care, because they want to provide that kind of government and service that their family deserves, and so does yours.
Right.
So
and they make less money.
That
I just think it's such an important point because they demonize. I wrote a Substack piece way back when Doge was doing its worst, about this, where government workers often are giving up much bigger paydays at private companies.
Hugely.
So they can be there to help us. And the demonization of them, man, that was one of those things that got me so angry and set me off. So thank you for bringing
we
that
have
up.
brilliant people working in every field of endeavor for the government. And just as you said, they are not there because they are seeking glory or riches. They are doing the critical things that keep you safe from disease, from foodborne illness, from natural disaster. And they are doing the science that enables our kids' future to be better than ours. And without that piece of hope for them that they are serving something greater, those talents are going to go elsewhere if they haven't already been fired by this administration.
Bree, another policy question before we get into some, I don't know, I'll call it silly stuff, but a final policy question. The number one issue for every voter generally is the economy. And we face this sort of situation where the wealth gap keeps getting wider. Where are you sort of in terms of economic policy, whether is it tax the rich? Is it increase minimum wage? Is it get rid of corporate welfare? I mean, what are some of if somebody comes up to you on the political campaigns trail and says, hey, how are you going to help us fix the economy? What's your answer?
Well, would you like to write that for me? Because you were pretty close right there with the vast majority of those things as
wow, David,
talk
you
about.
become a speechwriter here.
we talk about affordability. Clearly, the wealth gap and the inequality that continues to grow is problematic. So we do need to bring minimum wage up. We've got a bill in the Virginia legislature right now just to do that across the Commonwealth. And the rich, the billionaires in particular, need to pay more. Our top tax rate is just about as low as it's ever been. We again can talk back to those post-World War II eras, and there were 90% tax rate.
Yeah, I too, a Republican.
We absolutely have to understand that no one got that wealth on their own. That was built on the public infrastructure, the public goods that we have provided. Yes, hard work, entrepreneurship will get you far and are inherent to the American dream. But there's a public aspect of that we do need to fund. So at that top level, yes, there does need to be more that is something that enables shared prosperity for all of us.
Would you entertain, Elizabeth Warren has talked about a wealth tax. I think it's above 50 million. If you have, above that in investment savings, what have you, that there might be, I don't remember if it was a 1 or 2% tax on wealth above that. And I know AOC had spoken about at some point, and they always try to mix you up on this. Like, you're going to tax all of your money. No, for every dollar you make above 10 million a year, that would be hit at a 70% rate. And you don't have to say, again, I don't know if you support these exact things, but general concepts like that.
Right. And I think our tax code in that way is one of the things that a lot of us don't understand when we just say the top tax rate. That top tax rate is not on the first dollar you earn or the $100,000 you earn. That is on those millionth or 10 millionth or $100 million. But that's important to understand. So someone who says, why would I work any harder? I'll get taxed so much. Well, you're still making more money than you could possibly spend.
Right.
And we have to understand that, yes, the concept of something like a wealth tax may be one of the ways we can do that. I don't know what the right number is. This is something that I've got to understand and learn.
I was just checking concept. Yeah, you don't have to.
Conceptually, that is certainly possible. If we have money that is just sitting there and enabling generational wealth in a way that doesn't support shared prosperity, I don't know that that's the right way we should be approaching that.
All right, let's get into some silly stuff. Bree, you were a rocket scientist for 23 years. For those of us who literally, I couldn't do calculus or algorithms if my life depended on it. But what was the coolest thing about being a rocket scientist? What was the coolest thing you did?
I'm going to tell you a funny story, because this is when I was in college, studying to be a rocket scientist, and I got called to jury duty. And terrible case, but we're deliberating at the end, and someone is there fiddling with his chair, trying to get it to recline, and he can't get it. And he's like, God damn it, it would take a rocket scientist to figure this thing out. I'm like, I'm a rocket scientist. Can I help you? And I flipped the switch and he reclined, and I was like, okay.
And the fact that you
clearly
did it,
I am putting my education to use.
the fact that you did it, it worked. It was so, I wish you had video of that. That would be outstanding. All right. I have to ask you something that, and you can refrain if you'd like, but couldn't we come up with something better than Space Force? Maybe less sort of cartoonish. And I feel like I get that there's real things they're doing, though I didn't get that for a while. Because the name sounds so Trumpian, it makes you think of right away, like, it just, I don't know. It makes me think of like a parody of Star Trek.
Well, we're not Starfleet yet, but I actually think those 24th century ideals that were represented there,
I would love that. Yes,
are something to strive for. And
yes.
And I do want to point out that while a lot of people say, well, Space Force stole its imagery from Star Trek, that was an Air Force Space Command symbol, this Delta back in the 50s that Star Trek repurposed. So this is a little bit of us claiming our heritage. We could have a debate about what the name is.
I'm just being, again, this is the silly part. We're having fun.
No, I would talk about Space Force and space and rocket science all day, but I actually, in that, I have to get a little serious, because that mission is so critical. We cannot function as a modern society without space and the capabilities that we provide. So having Space Force there to protect and defend those capabilities that enable the world to function is absolutely critical. So a separate service that thinks about space first is really important.
So I have to ask you quickly, because then David will jump in, but I can't let him stop me on this one. So while at Space Force, did you ever encounter any extraterrestrial friends of ours that you got a chance to chat with? Maybe they gave us some advice, and they're like, God, you guys are screwing this.
And that excludes some of the producers of Blue Amp Media who may have contacted you to be on this show.
That's exactly.
I've wondered that question with some of the people I met. I'm like, is that a human suit that you're in right now? Because that's
like
a really weird thing that you're saying. But no, in general, my colleagues, everyone I work with, so amazing. But do aliens exist? Mathematically, I'd say yes. There's almost a certainty that they're out there. Will we ever contact them? Are they ever close enough? Do we have the energy to actually reach back and forth across the stars? Different question. But I'd like to believe that they're out there somewhere, and hopefully we can share a galaxy with them.
And Bree, to be a colonel in the military, you are a leader, right? And so many of us, whether we're following sports or coaches or whatnot, there's something I think so intriguing about leadership and leadership in this day and age. What are the best sort of leadership lessons that you learned over the course of your military career and guiding people of all sorts of different backgrounds and races and religions and ethnicities and sexual orientation? What'd you learn?
Well, there is so much to it, and I've written books on leadership, which has been a phenomenal journey to understand what it is about how leadership is not about a title or a position or formal authority. It is about a shared vision. It is about encouraging people to buy into something that can only be done together. Building those cohesive teams that can accomplish something far greater than any of you working alone or even at cross purposes, could do. And so one of the keys to that is explain the why. This classic military sense of, yeah, at some point you just need to do it. But in many cases, we need to tell why, because to get buy-in from people, they need to understand it. And if they understand why you're doing something, they'll get behind it. They'll provide suggestions on how to do it better. And in that case, it's explain your why and create an environment where people feel free to contribute to it. That you are not going to rip someone's head off for providing a suggestion that is different than yours. You want to understand it. You want to incorporate that and make a better solution. So leadership is about getting that shared buy-in. And one of the other avenues I learned a lot about that, particularly through my transition, was the value of vulnerability. And vulnerability, not just as we so often conceive of it as weakness, but it's sharing a piece of your humanity, letting others in, building a bridge to connect. So when people tell me like that I'm some sort of monster, I would love the opportunity to just have a meal with them. As you mentioned, connect over a sports team, something that we enjoy, find that piece of shared humanity, and then move forward from there.
Well, as long as you do University of Michigan, you can connect with David.
Sorry, as a Minnesota undergrad, I cannot get behind that concept.
Okay, now we've got our issue. Did you ever? We just have a couple minutes left. There was one more I wanted to ask earlier. I remembered. Did you think after you left the military, were there any other ways that you thought, hey, I'd like to serve in this way or that way besides running for Congress? Did you contemplate any others?
I did. There certainly could have been work in the nonprofit sector, in advocacy, in other organizations that are doing this work to defend democracy. Because I am so proud of all Americans. I know we mentioned what's going on in Minnesota earlier. When you stand up and show us what values should be, to me, it's all about how do we lead with our values. And I hope those are good values that actually respect the dignity of all humans and allow us to pursue that life, liberty, and happiness. So that could have been one of the routes that I took, but this was an opportunity to show how we can be better as a nation, as a Commonwealth here in Virginia, how I believe we can work together to solve those really hard problems. And we can go back to Kennedy again, saying we don't do this because it's easy. We do it because it's hard. And this was one of those steps that was scary in a way. But if the uniform gave me anything, it was the courage to do hard things. And particularly when it's on behalf of others. That matters to me. That is deep at the core of who I am. And I hope I have the opportunity to be that for Virginians.
Well, it does take an incredible amount of courage to step into the political arena at any level. And we salute you for that. And we also are so grateful to have had you on the program. Bree, for everybody who wants to sort of know more about you and contribute, and for Cliff and I who are going to set up some fundraisers for you and everything else we can do to get you elected in some district in Virginia, where can people find you? What's the website for your campaign? Give us all the details.
Looks like we got it right there on the screen at teambree.com. You can find out more about me, my career, what I believe in, and how we're going to fight to make a difference. So as you mentioned, every dollar counts. That is the barrier to entry in the political realm right now. And your support, that of your listeners, would mean the world to me, because it means we're going to be able to connect with the voters in the district and to be able to show that vision for an America that we can be, one that is better tomorrow than it is today and leads with its values.
Well, I'll give Cliff the last word, but I think I know I speak for everybody at Blue Out Media that amidst all of the challenges that we face in this day and age, meeting somebody like yourself, getting an opportunity to talk with you, seeing your willingness to sort of put yourself out there to try to work for the greater good, it is inspiring beyond words. And so thank you so much for what you're doing and also for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And my final word is going to be pretty close to David's. I mean, we have our kids right now. My wife and I are rewatching The West Wing with them, and not because everything that happened in there is reality. And I, worked in politics for years and all of that. It's more just for the spirit of when government, those in government, that the show gives and I believe this, that we had many, not always, but many in government that wanted to improve your life, that woke up thinking, how can we make people's lives better? Not how can I pocket more money? How can we get to the moon before the end of the 60s? How can we build the Hoover Dam, building things, creating things? That to me is what made America great, and would make America great again, and to take on those kinds of projects, as opposed to what we're doing. So honestly, I'm just going to say you are about as close as it gets to the West Wing in reality, in terms of somebody who is incredibly stood up against bigots, has stood up to those bigots in their faces, and still not retreated from the arena, but gone into a different part of it where you can serve us. And you still, I mean, how humble you are, how the dignity with which you talk about this. This is what I mean. I'm going to thank you, not just for the fights you've taken on, but this is what I want my kids to see, because the horror of that there now, since they were very young, with the brief interregnum of Biden, seeing Trump and seeing cruelty and incompetence and corruption at its worst, and thinking that's what government is. As you said, how we get people to trust government again is by electing people like you, who put government first and want to be there to help people. So, thank you for putting yourself out there. Thank you. I mean, it's a risk that people who don't do this kind of stuff don't fully get. And your service, and just your grace in the face of some pretty awful people out there. So thank you for everything you've done, and you are doing that my kids will see. How about that?
Thank you. And your words took me back to Teddy Roosevelt, and I'll update the words to say the person in the arena. This is the time that we need to engage. And I hope so many others that might be watching or listening out there choose to engage as well, to jump into the arena, to do things that are hard, even when you're afraid. That is courage. Go do those things, run for office, show up at a school board, do the boring stuff that democracy requires to function, and we're going to get through this.
Fantastic. Well, if we can get you out here to Cincinnati, Ohio, Bree, there'll be a fundraiser. Otherwise, we'll do something online. We'll figure it out.
Or Cliff and I will just take a road trip to Virginia. How about that?
Yeah,
that would be
we'll film it the whole time. Me and David just in the car, with straw
you can pretend
hats
you don't
on.
know us. You say, "Oh, those are my crazy relatives." Just ignore them.
Exactly. Seriously. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you so much to Colonel Bree, Fram, and thank you for your story and for speaking with us, David. As always, as I say, my ace in the hole here, former Emmy-winning anchor at MSNBC, who makes
brother from another mother.
There you go.
That, right?
And all of you who support us and support folks like Bree, thanks so much. We will be back tomorrow with another edition of Amped Up with, I even hate to say it, just Amped Up at 2 tomorrow. And I think that will be it. So we will just say our sign off as we always do. As the sun sets slowly in the west, my friends, I bid you a fond farewell.